Good afternoon, everyone. We are here today to discuss education. Lately in the news, if you've been paying attention, Juneteenth has become a very popular subject with everyone. Yesterday evening, I believe the Senate, the United States Senate, they unanimously passed legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. In the state of New York last year, they made Juneteenth a state holiday. So this last year, we did a week-long series of events where we discussed different issues concerning Black liberation. This year, we also decided to do a week-long series of events. It's a little different this year because we are open, as everyone knows, and attendance is different. We are having a lot of people replays, but we still wanted to discuss some issues that were very pressing. So today we are going to discuss education. We're going to discuss critical race theory, what's happened with all of our children with the pandemic, why are Black and brown children being affected so differently. This afternoon, we're going to be joined by Dr. Lester Young, Dr. Monica Ponder, and Dr. Marck Abraham. So the first person I'm going to have join us will be Dr. Lester Young. Dr. Young is he right now is the person in charge of the Board of Regents for the state of New York. He is the first African-American person to have this position, and we were all very excited when he was designated this honor of running the state of New York's Board of Regents. So Dr. Lester Young, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nadine. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon.
Thank you. And I know that you do have another engagement that you will have to get to shortly. I wanted to first start off with discussing with you, what is critical race theory? Is there a solid definition also of critical race theory? That's the first thing I wanted to do.
Well, I think one of the challenges facing educators is that currently there are many definitions that are being used and thrown out there. The second point that I would make before I actually describe what it is that all across America, the truth is under assault. And so even when we offer some informed definitions about what we mean, there's a large segment, a growing segment of the population that is actually attacking what we know to be true and factual. So simply stated, critical race theory is really about the acknowledgement that there are racial caste systems that have their origin during the period of enslavement through Jim Crow, and that they have an impact on most of our modern institutions and systems. And what happened, some have referred to, they resulted in what we call structural racism. Critical race theory has its origins in legal theory and emanates from some of our legal scholars. One that I am quite familiar with, and I'm sure your viewers are, is the late Derek Bell. And again, what it did historically is say that within U.S. law and institutions, that they are inherently racist, and that in spite of what some have termed as the advances of civil rights, it's deeply ingrained in the fabric of America. The other point that I would make is that those that understand critical race theory, they understand racism to not be to be part of the ordinary existence. In other words, what threatens lots of people is that critical race theory is not an aberration, right? It's something that's part of the normal existence of America. How it filters into education, it really undergirds a lot of the challenges that educators face when they're looking at things like school discipline, when they're looking at the way in which we place students in classes, commonly known as tracking, When we look at things like curriculum, the teaching of history, the use of standardized tests. And so that is really our challenge. And so I hope that gives you a better understanding of what it is.
It does. I hope the viewers also have gotten a better understanding. One of the things that has recently come up is the state of Florida has passed legislation to ban the teaching of critical race theory, as has the state of Texas. And I want you and Dr. Mark also address this question, if you can. Why do you think, and I know you said you briefly touched on this, that there's a undergirding right now of what the truth is in America, period. So if you could, why do you think that every legislation is being passed statewide? They're not even leaving it up to the school districts. They're deciding on whole states that they're going to ban the teaching of critical race theory.
Well, I it's interesting. You started out talking about Juneteenth, right? And so, it actually deals with this idea that information is powerful, very powerful, and one of the ways that throughout the history of America that we've been able to hold people of African descent and other people of color down is by denying them the truth and the information. I mean, we've always struggled throughout history with the accurate telling of our history, the complete accurate telling of our history. And I believe that what's behind this is an attempt to withhold the truth. And I think that if more of our young people understood who they were, the origins of the conditions that they find themselves in, that they were equipped to begin to look at the world critically and begin to think about how they can change it. I think that scares lots of people. And to be quite honest, the thing that I didn't mention is that the other aspect of critical race theory is that there is I don't know that advocacy is the right term. Perhaps activist is a more better term, that there's an activist component to it, meaning that you don't just study something, you don't just analyze it, but you look at it critically and you try to figure out, now, what do we have to do to change it? And so I think that's the reaction that you're seeing all across America in the passage of some of these, with the passage of some of these laws.
Okay. Dr. Mark, would you like to take a stab at that question? Why do you think, I agree with everyone's statements so far. Well, that's only been Dr. Young. But what do you think is the reason behind?
I think I just piggyback on, and I first, I would be remiss without saying thank you for having me on. And Dr. Young, thank you for the work that you're doing and with diversity, equity, and inclusion in New York State. And my brother's keeper, we are appreciative of you and your leadership. I think when I think about critical race theory, I look at it from a theoretical framework. It is what Dr. Young said. It is how you view an organization from a paradigm of how you look at something. And we look at education and we look at just some of the things that happen. You say, hey, why do these disparities exist? And you, from a theoretical framework, you're able to point out and say, well, because of the institution is institutionalized racism. So when you talk about critical race theory, you're talking about a paradigm. It's a lens on how you actually view an organization and how it operates. But the attack of critical race theory is so interesting and so intriguing in a sense that oftentimes teachers aren't teaching critical race theory because most people don't understand it in its totality to teach it. So what I look at it from is you are attacking the research that practitioners will use, that we can go into the building to actually support educators to provide a better system to dismantle the institutionalized racism that is transpiring in the school, so we can break those down and use a theoretical framework to provide support to increase student performance for the most marginalized group in the country. Again, when I read that report, I feel what Texas and Florida is doing is so dangerous for our country. My theoretical framework that I operate from is a culturally proficient leadership model. And I was able to write a book and have high performance rates for Black and brown children in my school because I operated from a theoretical framework, a framework that has proven itself to have success, but from a cultural perspective, so that I can support kids, not just looking at them from the color of their skin, but actually the culture that they come from. So the attack of critical race theory, the attack of culturally proficient leadership is an attack on, it's keeping that marginalized group marginalized. It's keeping that group that they see the light and they see the potential to advocate, they see the potential of moving forward, but we're going to stop the research, we're going to stop the funding, we're going to halt it and not let anyone provide any resources so that we can actually demonstrate and have success for Black and brown children. And that's what I think.
Can I just add to that what Mark said, and Mark, thank you for that your kind words when you began. But I think you touched on something. You know, historically, when we looked at racism, the way the media covers it, the way it appears in the textbook, the way it appears in lessons, is that people who are racist are bad people who do bad things. Right. What critical racism suggests is that there's something inherently wrong with the way we've structured the very foundation of this country, right? And so what happens is that in this situation, people benefit from Black people and other people of color being treated the way they are. So this is not just a situation where bad people do bad things. It is a situation that permeates the actual structure where one group is rewarded and another group isn't. And that becomes very threatening to people. That's because it says, quite honestly, that, you know, it's not enough for you to say, well, I'm not a racist, right? The question now becomes, do you actually benefit from a system where redlining occurs? Right. You know, do you benefit from a system that says that the only young people that can have access to high quality programs have to take and pass a standardized test that they were never prepared for? Right. And so, you know, it's almost like facing the music. You know, people don't want to face that. And so it's easier to continue. I mean, just the mere fact that certain states can pass laws, right, to not teach the truth would suggest that there's something systemically wrong with the system.
I always say that, you know, and I just say that I know we have another guest you're about to bring on. We're talking about maintaining the status quo. We're talking, and when I talk to educators and leaders, I always tell them, listen, you have to look at what is actually transpiring in the school. It's not by happenstance that Black males have the lowest graduation rates in the country. It's not by happenstance that Latino males have the lowest graduation rates in the country. It didn't just happen just by like, oh, you know, serendipity. It happened intentionally. We actually have systems in place to keep these groups down. And then we see black males make up 6% of the country with about 37% of the prison population, right? Like these things are happening intentionally. So now when you get away from critical race theory, we can't even examine the practices. We can't even look at what is actually transpiring to start to see how do we dismantle and fix these problems from a framework, from a lens that allows you to do that. So I mean, again, I think the people in Florida and the educators in Florida and just the politicians really need to start to look in the mirror and really start to have some courage and speak out against this. We can't just be in the North talking about this while all of these things are transpiring in the South. We need to come as a collective and say we need to work together on fixing these issues. But you're attacking research, you're attacking literature, you're attacking the real work that's necessary to create change and to start to liberate a group of people that have been so pushed down for so long.
Let me first apologize because we had technical issues at the beginning of the start of the program. I did not properly introduce Dr. Young and or Dr. Abraham. Dr. Young, as I said before, is on the New York State Board of Regents. He is now the Chancellor of the New York State Board of Regents. In addition to that, Dr. Young has spent years working in education. His motto has been, hold on, we're having some more technical difficulties. Hold on one second. Dr. Young, hold on, they don't want me to be great today. Dr. Young has been creating opportunities where every student can be successful. That is one of the things that he has specialized in. Dr. Young also worked with Assemblywoman Latrice Walker. She's very connected with him, as well as our Chief of Staff, Isis McIntosh Green. They speak so highly of Dr. Young that I'm always like, I want Dr. Young involved. He's an amazing person that works in the field of education. One of the reasons I felt the need to have this panel on Juneteenth was because myself and the assembly member, we always feel like education is the beginning of your path to success. It allows you opportunities to get into the door for you to it changes your life when you have education, and no one can take your education away from you. They can take a lot of materialistic things away from you, but people can never take away your education. So I was very excited when Dr. Young said that he could join us today. Additionally, we have Dr. Marck Abraham, who is the CEO of MEA Consultants. Dr. Abraham also has a book coming out that really delves into the issues around education. Dr. Abraham is a thought leader for men of color. He's a motivational speaker, and he has presented at various educational conferences. I just wanted to give context as to why our guests are qualified to speak in the manner in which they're speaking about critical race theory and all the other things surrounding education of Black and brown children. So I do apologize for not doing that at the beginning of the program. Additionally, I will be bringing up Dr. Monica Ponder, who is a professor at Howard University. And I think it's important that we get perspective of where our students are, colleges where our students are celebrated and not tolerated. My next question that I do have.
Can I say something before you go on,
Nadine? Of course.
To any of your listeners out here, let me just be clear. Please, I beg you, please do not get your definition of critical race theory from Fox News. I just want to throw that out there for you because, if you're listening to these people that are having sensational sound bites and they're just throwing things out there that they're not giving context, and you're not reading any literature or anything that has scholarly information, do not just take that as the gospel. Because I go and I spoke to some brothers out in Florida, and they was like, "Oh man, critical race theory is so bad." I said, "Have you ever read any journal articles on critical race theory?" "No, but on Fox News." Stop having these conversations on Fox News. So I just wanted to say that to anybody that might be listening.
Thank you. That's how I want you guys jump in when you hear something that you'd like to correct or that you think that the listeners need to know. That's the purpose of this conversation. Because I think when people are hearing, as I said in the news, oh, a whole state is voting not to have critical race theory, it does call into question, some of us, Black and brown people, are questioning, why do we need critical race theory? I attend a historically Black college as well. And I have people that went to school with me that said, what is the purpose of us learning history? At a HBCU, you're like, what do you mean? What is the purpose of us learning history? If we don't learn it, then the things that people fought for can be diminished. There's so many reasons why people should learn history. And that's the second question I wanted to ask. And I'm going to start with Dr. Ponder here with that question on Dr. Ponder. What value, in addition to critical race theory, as a professor at Howard University, you teach in several disciplines. Can you outline the disciplines that you teach in?
So I was out in the Kathy Hughes School of Communication in our Communication, Culture, and Media department, and I'm actually an epidemiologist and a professor of health communications. I work in public health.
Okay. So for instance, when you're dealing with issues around, so we have issues around the vaccine, and education was a huge issue for us around this vaccine being administered in the Black and brown communities. In your opinion, or however you frame it, what do you think the value of is in learning, in us teaching history to not only Black and brown students, but to everyone collectively learning history? Because one, a lot of people didn't understand the hesitancy that many Black and brown people had to the vaccine. And there was a historical component that a lot of people did not understand. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are several benefits of teaching, of embedding accurate history in our education system, K through 12 and beyond. One is just simple self-awareness. So as people move through life and their journeys and they make sense of their lives, context is important. Their family context, historical context, cultural context, even geographic context. I'm from Georgia, and I always say my people didn't migrate north after after the 50s, 60s, even after slavery ended. And so that does affect our diet, that affects, a lot of things that we believe, and even our core values. My family likes to make sure that we're safe, right? And that is a value of residents in my city, which was an early COVID hotspot, Albany, Georgia. Next is also sense making. So I think this cultural understanding of, I'm going to use myself as an African-American woman. What does that mean in terms of my place in being, and even opportunity within this country, and even compared to other groups? There's a really good book on the triple package, which actually compares every cultural group in America and minority group in America, and why some succeed and some don't. And it is a very fascinating read. But this country will make sure that you hear from an early age that success is about you as an individual pulling yourself up from your bootstraps. And we do that same thing in public health. It's very individualistic. You need to wear your mask. You need to get vaccinated. You need to stay safe. When there were economic, social, cultural barriers that prevented people from taking and even trusting the advice. And so taking education helps people to understand that some things are individualistic and others are structural. And which means a collective lens and a solution may be warranted. And I think to Dr. Young's point and Dr. Abraham, they mentioned civic engagement. How do I know what is the best thing to advocate for if I don't truly understand the issues and I've not been taught? And just to be an informed citizen is our right, and it's everyone's right. And to take that away is doing a disservice to residents, to citizens of this country, as well as those who may be having immigrant status. But I will say one thing I tell students, even at the collegiate level, so moving images is really important. So while the word critical race theory is not used in this film, one thing I always recommend is for students to watch the History Channel's documentary, The Men Who Built America. And it's 8 hours long, but it's in 4 parts. But it really talks about Rockefeller and Ford and how we got that 40-hour work week. And you'll notice Black Americans aren't really as visible, but it is a very compelling, quick study in terms of what America was designed to do. And some of that takes the responsibility off of us as individuals to think that we're here to change America tomorrow. Social progress takes time. and looking at the trajectory of this country, these things take time. They're important to understand and to discuss and to make sense of and to advocate for. So those are that's my take on the benefits of making sure that we provide adequate, accurate history and education to all students.
Thank you, Dr. Ponder. That was great. Dr. Young, I have a question for you as well. This past year, because I know you have to exit soon, I want to make sure I get this question to you. I want to hear your answer. The pandemic has really ravaged New York. As you know, our education system, we have had virtual learning, we have had hybrid learning. What are your thoughts on what happened this past year? And what do you think that collectively we should do? You know, there were disparities in education before. Right now, what do we need to do to get back on track? Like, what are some of the things we need to do as parents, as educators? You know, please offer us some of your guidance and wisdom on this.
Sure. So I'll try to be specific. You're absolutely right. The pandemic had a disparate impact on different groups, and we saw that play out in New York as well as across the country. And so this idea of how do we make up for it? So the first thing I would say is that that's never going to happen unless you have a very deliberate approach to doing it, right? So the thing that we do in education, at least in K-12 and in maybe some of the higher ed, but I know definitely in K-12, is this idea that we've become over consumed with all. And this is what we're going to do for everyone, and the notions of equal. And as far as I'm concerned, and I think this is factual, that all has never meant all in America. And there's always been a segment of the what I would call the we that's been separated from the rest. And so if we're serious about addressing the desperate impact that COVID has had on the education of Black students and other students of color, then we have to have a very specific and deliberate approach to addressing that. I mean, that's kind of like what we did when we enacted the My Brother's Keeper legislation in New York State. We understood that if we were serious about addressing the conditions that Black males find themselves in New York State, you know, we were never going to get to that if we were talking about what we're going to do for everyone. That we had to have a very deliberate, a specific approach. Dr. Ponder talked about context. Well, that's context. You know, you can't design a strategy that doesn't address the context in which the very people you want to impact, it doesn't recognize their context. So I think the first thing we have to do is really think about how we do that. And that's more around what lots of people refer to as equity, which is also under attack. And so when we, the Board of Regents, at the May board meeting, for the first time, we passed our state policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we were very clear about defining what we meant, what we were going to do. We talked about the 10 elements, et cetera. And so there is this growing movement in New York to say that, well, if you're talking about diversity or if you're talking about inclusion, well, that's un-American. And people are actually buying that. Right? They're accepting that. They're saying that we're trying to indoctrinate their children. And so we want to go back to the way it was. And so what I would say is that we have to be very deliberate in our approach. I also think that we have to be somewhat decentralized, right? We have to talk to people where they are. This can't be an approach where someone in Albany dictates this is what we have to do across the state of New York, right? We have to, Of course we want to set a standard, but we have to understand that perhaps what's happening in Buffalo is very different than what's happening in Newburgh.
Right.
Or what's happening in Long Island is very different than what's happening in Washington Heights. And so we have to be willing to engage the people around what is in the best interest. It's interesting. There's an article today, and they talk about how a particular school district in New York State, they received a grant that was supposed to enhance the growth and development of males of color. And what the community's in uproar over is that they have this grant, but they never talk to any community of color in that city around what should be included. And so to me, that's just wrong-headed. And so we have to be deliberate, but we also have to understand that there is a context, and it should be ground up. We should be talking to the community. We should be talking to parents. We should be talking to students. One of the most revealing groups around impact of the pandemic, yes, parents have been able to articulate, but it's not until you talk to young people that you understand what this thing has actually done to them, right? This whole notion of taking the communal and social aspect of schooling out of the mix and putting kids in front of a computer when education is social, right? Historically, there's a communal aspect to the education of Black young people. And so for the last year and a half to 2 years almost, we've denied that opportunity to young people, and it's had a huge toll on them. And so it seems to me, again, if we're talking about what do we need to do, we can't just talk to each other. We've got to talk to young people. We have to talk to people in the community.
Thank you, Dr. Young. I am now, Dr. Young, I do know that you do have to depart. Is right now the time you have to leave? I want to.
Are you asking me a question?
Yes, I'm asking. Is this your?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it is. I am terribly sorry, Dr. Ponder and Dr. Abraham. I just had a pre-scheduled event that I've got to get to.
And that's okay, because we're going to have you on again. We're going to have everyone on again. This was just a Juneteenth special. We're going to do another special series on education, because as we said, it's very important that we understand as educators and as parents what it is that we need to do coming up on this school year. So like you said, it's not a do-over. We have to work with what we have where we are. We need to find out what, the things that we need to do. I do want to thank you, Dr. Young, for joining us today. And Dr. Abraham, your turn to answer the question.
You might want to repeat some of the question for me. I was listening to Dr. Young, but if you just kind of repeat some of it so I can kind of be aware.
So the question was centered around the pandemic. What are some of the issues and some of the things that have happened with our children? What are some of the things that we need to do going forward? How do we get back on track with the education system with our children? Because we have had it ravaged the Black and Brown community in several ways. And one of the ways is, education wise, our children were at a disadvantage, whether it was through technology, whether it was through, a lot of, I know my son is a tactile learner and he did not get to go to school. So all of these things considered, you as someone who has an initiative that is aimed at Black and Brown children, what are your thoughts on how we, center ourselves for the upcoming, I know school year is just ending, but what do we need to do this summer? What are the things that you think that we need to hear as parents, as educators, as a community about education?
And I apologize, my little fire alarm is going off. There's no fire, it's just going off.
I was going to say, Dr. Abraham, do you need to go?
Yeah, listen, it keeps buzzing and it's buzzing and stop. I don't know what it is. So I'll try to push past that. I think one of the big things that, from my perspective, is important is leadership.
Okay.
at the local level. To piggyback on what Dr. Young was talking about, I think it's important that you have the student voice, because you need to know exactly how they feel and how life has been for them during this time. But my whole big push is working with the leaders and having them create systems of success to assure that our kids are going to come back into a school that's safe, that's fun, that's engaging, because they have been challenged. They're going to be challenged with a perspective of, we have an option to be at home. And I hope school leaders remove that option and really provide kids with an environment and a culture for success. And this thing is like bothering me, so I'm gonna go check on that. So give me a second.
Oh, yes. Okay. Dr. Ponder, do you mind addressing that question?
Yeah. So, from a public health standpoint, intersecting with education, the biggest concern on my radar are the impacts on social and emotional learning and health.
Right.
And, some students thrived during this time and some students didn't. I've even heard reports of, even adults experiencing fewer microaggressions because of not having to go into the workplace. So all of these things matter. But what I, as a crisis communicator, what I remind people is that there's some cultural groups that are always in crisis. And so it is COVID, but also think about all of the racial tension and unrest that happened during the last 12 to 15 months. Think about all of the political shifts in terms of even just variable policies, in terms of risk and exposure, and just what that meant for communities and families. And I would say, I think the other part of your question was about just how do you move forward? We have to develop interventions at the community level that our other panelists mentioned, but also that focus on repair and healing and support. And sometimes those aren't things that we traditionally bring at the forefront when it comes to education, but repair could be what are your needs? How were you impacted? Then making sure that informs really how we ease students back into in-person environments as COVID cases continue to go down. And I'm knocking on wood that they will continue to go down. And I think that is an important conversation. And then the healing, so that even as students have made sense of a lot what they see on the news and social media in terms of racial tension and unrest, what does that mean in terms of going back into interpersonal environments with schools that may have diverse populations? I think these are important conversations to have and to revisit at an age appropriate level.
Yes. Oh, being joined by Ms. Rhonda Skillern-Jones, who is from Texas. I'm waiting for her to populate. She's not there yet. Okay. Hold on, I'm going to add her here. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well. How are you all?
I'm well. So, Dr. Abraham, Dr. Ponder, this is Miss Rhonda Skillern-Jones. She is from the state of Texas. We addressed this, but we want to circle back with this while we have time and while you're here. Mm-hmm. We wanted to know specifically what is going on in Texas. If you could give us a rundown of, we know there has been legislation that has been passed that has been designated to address critical race theory.
Oh. I'm sorry.
Okay. I was like, is she running up?
No, we needed to close that door. So yeah, we to just give a little bit of background. Our governor is Republican,
okay,
and very much into the politics of the previous administration.
Okay.
And so, and we have a Republican-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate in the state of Texas. So he has the full support of both houses. And the insurrection is very big with them. And education is very big with them. Education is our last pot of money that is not already privatized. They've already managed to privatize everything, the prison system, the medical system, everything except education. And so they are very vested in ensuring that that particular pot of money is utilized to uphold the education standards that they believe in, which are not normal democratic values. And so the critical race theory was passed to ensure that our education curriculum did not include any discussion on Black Lives Matter, any discussion on the insurrection, any political views, none of the systemic issues that plague our education system itself. So no biases, no unconscious bias, none of that can be taught in our system or in the plans that the teachers put together for the students in their lesson plans. So that was what critical race theory, that was the gist of the legislation. And it was just geared towards ensuring that our kids do not have any of their history. And we know that includes slavery, systemic racism, all of those things. And it's just an assault combined with our voter suppression laws. They work well together to achieve the results that our government is trying to achieve.
Can I ask what happens? So say a school decides to not comply to that law. Have they spelled out any consequences for a school for deciding that they're going to not do what the legislation says?
So the legal penalties have not been worked out because he just signed the bill, but it is a law. So there would be criminal penalties and civil penalties attached to that. And so now, of course, all of our teaching staff is like, we're staying away from it, period, because not only would it mean them losing their jobs, but also have some criminal penalty associated with it as well.
You're saying a criminal penalty would be lodged against a teaching faculty member with regards if they discussed anything. So you're not allowed to discuss slavery at all. That's out of the. What are they? What
so well, now what has to happen is the State Board of Education, who controls the curriculum, they have to then, it's very controlled here. They have to put the guidelines in that working with this, within this law, that do the framework for the teaching. So they are responsible for the curriculum essentially. And once the State Board of Education finalizes that curriculum, a teacher cannot teach outside of what is in there. So if they decide that it's indentured servitude instead of slavery, then that's how it will be taught.
Wow. So, Dr. Abraham, so to your point, we are in a very dangerous situation. Is there anything that you think that we who are outside of the state of Texas can do to support the efforts that are made to be inclusionary in the education system? Like, what do you think that we can do to support you guys in Texas?
So it's ironic. Today, we have all of our Democratic state reps and a couple of our Democratic senators who are meeting with Vice President Harris. It's on the national news because they are trying to get them to support a national effort to combat the things that are happening here in Texas and in Florida and some other places. And so if we can put a federal law in that prohibits these kinds of things and promotes what we actually need to be doing, then that will override the local efforts here. So if we have other states that are also have representatives weighing in with our federal officials, that needs to take place, and that helps Texas a lot.
Okay.
Wow. That's sickness.
Yeah, that's very deep. I was so glad when I saw that you were joining because we really wanted to hear firsthand what is happening in Texas. And you work with the college. Can you give us a little bit? You at one point in time were working with the what grade levels were you working with?
So I was on the school board K-12 here in Houston, kindergarten through 12th grade for early education for 8 years. And then for the last 2 years, I've been on the board for the Houston Community College system. Kind of made that transition to higher ed.
Okay. And one more question for you. In your opinion, what have you seen with the pandemic and the Black and brown children in Texas? How have they fared during the pandemic with their learning? And, we all know there were disparities before. And what have you seen now?
Oh, the gap has widened here for us. We were making some strides in closing the gaps, but we can clearly see after last year's results that the gap has widened for us here. Not only did the digital divide not help much, and we in Houston in particularly provide laptop devices for each of our kids who was at home during the pandemic, but we found that was only half the problem. If they didn't have internet, that didn't do very, very well. And even though we had programs who put internet in, with the amount of overload of technology on these internets, they weren't very reliable. We also had systems here that had never been tested to that capacity for at-home learning. And so the technology, the software that was being used was sometimes overwhelmed as well. Couple that with parents who are not all the time as literate as they need to be to help their children. They're not sometimes equipped to help the kids because of the systemic underachievement that has happened with them as well. And so if they're not technically literate, able to help deliver a curriculum as if they were a teacher and still manage to get through the pandemic crisis for their jobs and their households and all of that. So it just, all of that snowballed into something that was really out of control for both the school systems and the parents. And so we have a widened gap that we are now going to have to remediate before we can even move the kids to the next level. So for here in Texas, and we were already behind in the South, we're like number 47 on the spectrum of the way education is delivered, and we're underfunded by the state as well. None of the federal dollars that flowed into the state were given to the critical areas where they were needed. The school systems did get some, but it was not enough to cover the need. So we're facing an entire 2 to 3 grade levels for 2 to 3 years, because that's what it takes to remediate before these children are even able to get back to where they should have been this year.
Oh, wow. Whew.
That's criminal.
Yeah.
We're talking about kids who already were at a disadvantage.
Correct.
So they came in at a disadvantage. And for the majority of our Black and brown children. So I'm sorry.
Our school system was already set up for them to be disadvantaged because we were one of the last school systems in Texas in the South period to integrate already. And
what year did you guys integrate?
Well, we never integrated.
Oh, okay.
We segregated, but we never integrated, which means that we had a white section of town, a Black and brown section of town. And what they did was, instead of integrating, which would have been to send white kids here and Black kids here, they simply desegregated. They tested the brightest African-American children and bused them into the white areas without ever doing the inverse. So there was never integration here. And we built on that system so that over the years, currently, our system is still so desegregated that we still have pockets where there are almost 100% of African-American, brown, and Black kids still being educated without white kids being bused in. And the inverse is true as well. We have sections of our city where it's almost totally white. So there's never been true integration here.
So can I just make sure I'm hearing this clear? You have 100% of Black children in one school, lower performing, behind, educational divide, a digital divide, teachers teaching them. And on top of that, we can't even esteem and empower and educate these young Black and brown children by letting them know that they come from more than just slavery, or empowering them with information to say, you come from scientists and you're brilliant, and let me show you the connection from your past. With all of this going on, we can't even do that to even make them feel special and make them feel important. On top of all of that, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. And it is intentional, and it is systemic. let's be clear. I want to give you why this is happening and why it's so extreme. Harris County is one of the largest counties, or the largest county in Texas. And for the first time, the last election cycle, Harris County turned blue, complete blue. The power that happened there was a huge threat to a base here in Texas. We had an African-American male who came in as a temporary county clerk who allowed voting for 24 hours, who allowed drive-through voting, who allowed walk-up voting, who allowed applications to be sent out for mail-in ballots 100% across the city without them having to be requested and returned at a larger rate than it had ever been returned before. So this is simply backlash for us electing 19 female judges, Black judges to the bench, for us having elected a Black mayor, a Black county commissioner, when I tell you, this is backlash from all of that. So these are very strategic things that are being put in place to ensure that that does not happen again.
Oh, wow. Thank
I
you.
always say that to be in education, you have to have courage and you have to have a backbone. And if you're fighting for a marginalized group and you're fighting for Black and brown children and you're afraid of persecution, then you can't do it. So, you know, to any teacher in Texas, any administrator in Texas, you know, I hate, listen, I speak up, well, I try to speak the truth, so don't shoot me down, but they can't arrest every teacher in the doggone state of Texas that want to advocate for kids. So you can't be afraid when you're trying, because the work you do is going to save their lives. And empowering them and getting them to feel like they are important and get them to understand their history, that's going to save their lives. So
Abraham, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Dr. Ponder does have to go. So I just wanted, Dr. Ponder, for you to share any last words you have with us about critical race theory, education, our children, whatever you have to say before we say goodbye to you and we continue briefly with the conversation with Ms. Skillern-Jones and Dr. Abraham. So did you have any closing statements you wanted to make?
Yeah, I want to thank you for inviting me today. I think it's been a full circle conversation, starting with just even what is the issue and then going through just general education concerns and then really looking more specifically at Texas. I love, Rhonda, that you mentioned systemic underachievement. You brought in even the historical context of, you know, why our schools look the way they do. You even brought us even back to just last fall and the implications of a successful election. And these things matter when we look at the present moment. And so how do we keep context? And context is education. We even educate ourselves. It actually never stops, you know, to the day we die, right? And so even just listening to you and just seeing what this breakdown looks like at the community level is, number one, heartbreaking. But I do know that knowledge is power. And I thank you, Nadine, for bringing us all together and for this conversation. It's been enlightening. And I look forward to working with you all again.
Thank you. Take care, Dr. Ponder.
Good afternoon.
I also want to say, that we are going to do this again, because it's important that we keep in touch with our states of Texas, Florida. We need to know what's going on and what we need to do to support you. I think, Dr. Abraham, you made that point that it's not just, we can't just silo the situation in those states and not be supportive of them, because, you know, we have relatives, cousins, families, friends, whoever that are living there. And, you know, as a community, we have to make sure that people know that we're going to stand with you guys. As, you know, an ignorant person in the state of Texas is a danger to us everywhere as a state. And that's something that we definitely have to make clear. Rhonda, I wanted to ask another question with regards to Texas. What is happening with, you guys are a broadband desert as well? Do you have a lot of spots that are broadband deserts?
We do.
Okay, so that definitely has affected the children's ability to interface with their educators this year. And I also wanted to, as we're closing out, I just wanted to ask, how is the church in Texas getting involved with the educational component of this situation? Has there been, historically for Black and brown people, the church has been a central unit, a central communication hub for us. And what do you see happening with that as far as getting the word out? Or are they trying to do some education on their own for the kids? Like what is that looking like?
So we have, there are two things. One, there's been an erosion of children over the last, I would say, decade, actually participating in church in most of our high poverty areas. That, I think for my generation, there were far more of us involved in a church setting than we find now. The church, because of the pandemic, has really just focused on getting family service with social services and feeding kids. I mean, we have, over the last year and a half, just been focused on meeting the needs of the families so that they can survive. So there hasn't been a whole lot of education work. We do have some of our mega churches who are participating with the legislators at the legislative level to ensure that the kids in their service, their congregations are getting what they need. And so the church is there, but our primary focus for most of our churches has been just the essentials of life over the last 18 months.
Okay. Well, this has been a great hour. I want everyone to give me their closing remarks on, what you need from us or any action items you want us to take. And like I said, over the course of the summer, probably closer to the beginning of, when do you guys start school, Rhonda?
Late August.
Okay, late August. And Dr. Abraham, are you still working in schools or are you just consulting now?
Well, you say just, it makes kind of different.
No, when
I'm messing with you. I work with, I'm fortunate enough to work with principals around the country. So
okay. I wasn't sure if you had your own school or if you were doing. No, when I meant just, I meant were you in one school or were you in many? I'm sorry, I apologize for that.
That's okay. I'm in multiple schools around the country, and I would love to listen. Any principal out of Texas, call me. I would love to support you in this work. We have a book coming out next month called "What Success Looks Like." Strategies to increase graduation rate, successful strategies to increase graduation rate for young men of color. And then we have the Summer Leadership Institute that we already got about 50 school leaders around the country have signed up for, where we're working with them on reopening schools and making sure that we provide a culture of success for those young people for the 21-22 school year, where we're talking about how do we decrease that achievement gap and how do we hold our teachers accountable while encouraging them to still do the work so that all of our babies can have success. So, anybody want to get in contact with me, I'm available on all social media platforms. I'll talk to anybody, and I'm thankful to do the work that I do to support kids, especially our Black and brown young men across the country.
And how would people get in touch with you over social media?
Instagram is Dr. Dr. Marck Abraham. Facebook is just Marck Abraham. Twitter's the same. I'm available, a quick Google search, Dr. Marck Abraham. You'll see all my information, and I'm available anytime to support you be success in the success of your school. So
thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Ron, did you have any closing words for us?
Sure. I'm just, thank you for having me be a part of this conversation. It's always good to be able to come on and let people know what's happening in our state so that they are aware. We have lots of people moving here from across the country. And I think the word needs to get out because we do need the support down in the South around this. So anytime there's a conversation, I'm happy to participate in that. Sorry that I thought it was 1 o'clock our time.
That was, I didn't even think about that. I totally slipped my mind that we were in different time zones. I apologize for that as well.
Not a problem. But we just to know that we're all in this work together, and it's going to take a collective effort. Everyone can't do everything, but everyone can do something. So it's going to take a collective effort for us to ensure that the generation that comes behind us has every opportunity to flourish and get the education they deserve. And so each part of lifting is a bigger part of a bigger picture. So thank you for the work that you all are doing. I am also available on all social media platforms, Rhonda Skillern-Jones on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I am on our website at HCC and available for any other equity work that needs to be done and through my consulting company. So happy to participate. Let me know in the future if you need anything else from me. And let's just continue to stay in the work because it's going to take a collective effort. Thank you.
Right. Thank you both. Thank everyone who participated today in our conversation, despite our technical issues. And I look forward to having everyone again as we, enjoy our summer. But as we're heading back into school, we will be having another conversation around education. So thank you again. Everyone have a good day. Oh, and later today, we will be having another symposium that will be centered around voting. It's called Your Vote is Your Voice. How your votes have shaped local politics in different states. And I think Rhonda gave us excellent examples of what has happened in her state from the 19 judges. So those things are important that everyone understands how these things manifest themselves in little pockets throughout the United States. And this is how we had Black Wall Street and things of that nature. Where we live and where we vote is where we get to have a say in, certain topics that affect us. So if you can, tune in tonight at 7 p.m. and we are looking forward to speaking with you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.